Analyzing the Language Policy at Harold Wicks Middle School, presented by Abril Overgaard. First, let's begin by defining language policy. Language policy has to do with decisions, regulations, and guidelines about the use of languages and the rights of speakers of the languages in question. Language practices and policies are crucial because they may either promote or restrict the teaching of languages. Language policies is not only about what it's written, but also about the rules and the practices and the agenda that supports biliteracy. Educational institutions in the United States have played a significant role in both determining and implementing language policies. The aims and the objectives for this project is to identify the language policy at Harold Wicks Middle School and to identify if their policies promote or restrict the teaching of languages. According to the El Paso Independent School District 2020, their vision statement says the following, quote, "We have a competitive advantage as our community will be bilingual, biliterate, and multicultural with the opportunity to become multilingual, making EPISD graduates the most productive contributing members of our global society," unquote. Their mission statement reads as following, quote, "The El Paso Independent School District graduates every student prepared for higher learning and careers to empower them as knowledgeable and engaged citizens, innovators, and drivers of a robust bicultural economy." In this statement, I feel very strongly about the language policies that are being for biliteracy and bilingualism. In an effort to analyze the El Paso Independent School District policy, we contacted the district and we spoke to Pat Gonzalez from the El Paso Independent School District, which stated that the school follows the two-way dual language program and it's a 50-50 model. The language policy aims for instruction 50% of the time in English and 50% of the time in Spanish. The goals of the program are for the students to become bilingual and biliterate, to achieve higher academic achievement, and to be cultural competent. Harold Wicks Middle School is part of the El Paso Independent School District, and it offers a learning environment where teachers make use of the innovative instructional strategies with an intensive, sheltered English program for the limited English proficient students. An interview was conducted with Mr. Luther, the principal at Harold Wicks Middle School, to learn more about the language policy at his school. Number one, how many students are enrolled in the dual language education program at your school? There are currently 450 students enrolled in this program. How are the dual language education goals of your program aligned with Student Success Initiative? They are horizontally and vertically aligned, meaning they go hand in hand, shooting for the needs and the student growth. All of our Level 1 Limited English Proficient LEP students are placed in the dual language program because it is a major component of the school's curriculum and instruction. What additional support do you offer to your emergent bilinguals? Does your program offer shelter instruction or paired literacy? The additional support that is offered for the emergent bilinguals is dual language, and depending on the TELPAS, some students are placed in ESOL depending on their level. A case study to analyze the language policy was conducted at Harold Wicks Middle School. The observations were conducted for 4 consecutive days in the classroom, and it consisted of a group of students that participate in the regular dual language program. The school follows the 50-50 model for the following classes: social studies, science, and math. Most of the classes are run week to week. In this regular dual language program, it promotes biliteracy and bilingualism, and it is conducted 3 days in English and 2 days in Spanish, followed by 2 days in English and 3 days in Spanish the following week. One important observation was that Connecting Worlds is a gifted and talented program, and this is a two-way dual language program for the gifted and talented students. The humanities is a thematic and project-based, so it is the exception. Additionally, all dual language students participate in a 100% Spanish language class that is considered languages other than English, Latin, but it's mostly closely related to the Spanish language arts. Translanguaging in action. Sanchez, Garcia, and Solorza 2017 proposed changes to the strict language allocation policy of the dual language education programs by replacing it with a translanguaging allocation policy that consists of three components: translanguaging documentation, translanguaging rings, and translanguaging transformation. The purpose for translanguaging documentation is to have a more holistic understanding of the child as a learner. This was all on page 7. During my observations in the classroom, I made an important connection. Although the school follows the 50-50 model, teachers at Harold Wicks Middle School utilize resources such as translanguaging documentation, translanguaging rings, translanguaging transformation. The students are allowed to utilize Google Translate, the use of videos, collaboration with peers, and small groups that offer translanguaging support. This is all done in an effort to support individual students. This also identifies another connection that is referenced by Reyes 2012, which he explains that biliteracy in the classroom context focuses on how the students, the peers, and the adults influence one another during the interactions in the classroom in bilingual programs and across communities. This is how it is done at Harold Wicks Middle School. The teachers do offer help for the emerging bilinguals at all times, and they allow the use of translanguaging in the classroom. Building cross-language connections. According to CU Boulder School of Education 2015, cross-language connections are really quite helpful for children because languages are interconnected, and this needs to be made explicit for them because they will think and develop deeper metalinguistic awareness. The learning and the processing of information happens across languages when these connections are implemented and practiced in the classroom, and it purposely plans opportunities for children to compare similarities and differences. During this case study at Harold Wicks Middle School, the children were allowed for students to develop critical consciousness as well because they had an assignment. It was a story that recaptures the unforgettable quest of a Honduran boy looking for his mother 11 years after she is forced to leave her starving family, and he needs to go and find her. She left for looking for a better life. And so through this assignment, the children were able to build cross-language connections. The story was Enrique's journey, and they were finding similarities, connecting, and utilizing all 4 domains. They were reading, writing, listening, and speaking, because let's remember that listening and speaking are just as important. The teacher also used color coding, exploring cognates, punctuation, and capitalization. It was very interesting to see that the children were building cross-language connections as well as developing critical consciousness. Metalanguage in action at Harold Wicks Middle School. Metalanguage is a language that analyzes language. In other words, metalanguage allows for a unique interpretation of language. According to Escamilla et al., 2014, metalanguage is thinking and talking about language, and in terms of biliteracy, understanding the relationships between and within languages. This was found on page 67. Through cognate instruction, the use of bilingual books, strategic use of language, educators at Harold Wicks Middle School effectively taught cross-language connections when working on Enriquez's journey. Thus, it strategically fostered the development of metalanguage and biliteracy development. Developing biliteracy at Harold Wicks Middle School. Analyzing biliteracy development through the lens of Ms. Cecilia Chavez, Assistant Principal at Harold Wicks Middle School. Quote, Connecting Worlds is a component of the two-way dual language program, and it requires for all assignments to be submitted in academic Spanish. Mesita Elementary School is a feeder school that promotes the use of Spanish, and it promotes the students to have a strong preparation by the time they attend Harold Wicks Middle School in order to reach their biliteracy goals. During the interview, I asked Ms. Chavez what she meant with academic Spanish, and she explained that the students are not just learning street Spanish. Students are expected to use proper Spanish, punctuation, capitalizations, and to be fully biliterate. Findings. As previously mentioned, language policy is not only about what is written, but also about the rules, practices, and the agenda that supports biliteracy. Through a case study conducted for 4 consecutive days, qualitative methods demonstrated that the language policy at Harold Wicks Middle School promotes the teaching of languages. Teachers in the classroom strategically plan for translanguage, meta-language, and cross-language connections to foster biliteracy development. These are the references that I used to analyze the language policy at Harold Wicks Middle School. Thank you very much for your time.